having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, great. So let's. I'm going to get into what you guys do with Terrapin and all of that, but let's learn a little about you. You're South African,
Yes.
and your business is South African. Tell me a bit about you.
So just to correct you there a little bit, our company is actually founded in Australia.
Aha.
Terrapin Global. We have one of the offices in South Africa.
And on every other continent.
Oh yes, of course. You have to have a global reach nowadays. Personally, I have a degree in psychology and communications, and recently in the past year or two I found an absolute pleasure in working with the financial services sector and learning about the new technologies and innovations that are currently entering the space. But excluding the financial services sector, there's so much going on in the world that you can't not have a thought leadership platform whereby everyone comes together to network. So yeah.
Well, nicely put and to the point. Prior to so there's a platform that serves the payment and fintech space. It used to be card and payment. This was a Terrapin platform. What do you look for when you're developing the content and creating that platform that will bring the various thought leaders together to shape the lives you hope to touch?
Well, you're 100% correct. So Terrapin has been running Seamless for 3 years, previously known as Cards and Payments Africa, in which we encompassed a holistic view of the African continent and where it's currently sitting with fintech, payments, e-commerce and retail. However, with the different regions being at different technology innovation points, it's very difficult to create that holistic view because the challenges in South Africa are completely different to the challenges in West Africa, and you can't encompass them together. You can't overlook them, you can't hide them under the rug. So hence why we've now developed the regional events. So Seamless Southern Africa is our big one that's had over 20 years in Africa. It takes place, all of these events are annual. It takes place in Cape Town. Recently, 4 years ago, we launched East Africa, which is based in Kenya, North and West. These were launched this year, one in Cairo, and the East, the West one we are actually launching in November.
Oh, wow.
At Ghana.
So you're doing that in Ghana. Okay. Now, payments are very interesting. There was I think it was a KPMG report at the beginning of, this was 2016 report that was looking at the evolution of payments across the continent. And incidentally, East Africa seems to be pushing quite a lot of transactions in that space. From your experience, what has been the secret to the growth of integration, financial inclusion, and the kinds of digitally driven payments that we see over there?
For me, one of the biggest things that are overlooked is the trust. You can't, as a bank, you can't grow if your customers don't trust you. And with that unfortunate misconception of banks are not safe or they're trying to steal the money, it inhibits them. So customers aren't interested in it. I mean, you've got, for example, the likes of Tanzania in the east, which is, if I recall correctly, 70% unbanked. Here in Ghana, it's sitting at 68% unbanked approximately. And not only are banks battling with the trust, but also the rural reach. There's so much competition, number one, with over 30 banks. I know that there's a couple mergers going on. But on top of that, as I said, your reach and the trust, they are clear indications on challenges. Now, if you take the looks of South Africa, 80% of the market is banked. So that's what I'm saying with the challenges of being completely different.
That's right.
And when devising content for an event of this scale and this proportion growth, you have to keep in mind this. So while we're looking at the global players, because obviously banks want to grow to become your international standard of the likes of Santander or a Rabobank,
Hmm.
you've got to also set your realistic views of your short and long-term goals.
Right. Now, quite a lot of the time when you talk to people in the technology and innovation space, there's a lot of talk of leapfrogging and the fact that for Africa to, or the least developed part of Africa in terms of banking and financial inclusion, digital holds the key to the future. How exactly will that happen, considering that, so by 2030, we're likely to have about 1.5 billion people on this continent, urbanization, which will put more pressure on the infrastructure, which we have very little of, and then also that you're going to now have an age demographic of more younger people, in maybe 60% of the population being younger than the older generation. How can innovation sit in that space and revolutionize the way we do things?
Firstly, I love the word leapfrog. It's fundamental of what we need to do.
Mm.
The best thing about thought leadership and bringing it together is actually using case studies whereby you can see, for example, a bank in Kenya
Mm-hmm.
has been able to actually jump over challenges based on an international example.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you take the likes of M-Pesa, look at what they've done.
Mm.
And because of that, they've managed to actually go over and above what the community was looking for, and they've managed to allow that integration into play.
Mm-hmm.
There've been a couple of other innovations that have tried to replicate that success, but they've got a hidden key. And that's what I feel people are trying to find, is that hidden key. What works for you? How can we actually jump not only to 2030, but to 2040 and 50 and beyond,
Mm-hmm.
creating a sustainable, innovative platform which incorporates and collaborates with new innovations that come up annually. There's so much innovation and there's so many brilliant ideas out there, but integrating it into a core system is where the challenges also come into play.
Fantastic stuff. My guest on the show today is Molly Newman. It's 22 minutes past 1 p.m. This is the Executive Lounge, and I'm Inshira Addo. We've just been catching up on the concept of financial fintech and financial inclusion, and also integration. Now, on the question of integration, a lot of what you mentioned, for example, M-Pesa, mobile money, Vodafone Cash, you name it, they all run off the back of mobile technology. And in our space, these are competing interests. So if an MTN, a Tigo, Airtel, or Vodafone are competing in a market, it means that each would want to try and offer their own. Is there, in your mind, an area of opportunity for better integration?
Of course, there's always an area for integration. I believe MTN here has a market share of 75 to 80%, and while they are facilitating that mobile money transaction, they can't actually reach their full potential. They're not a bank. They're not recognized as a bank. They cannot hold cash,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the challenge for them comes into play. So yes, they're globally renowned. They are very innovative, and they hold most of the market share here. And that's just in Ghana. Forget the rest of West Africa, where they are the most prominent telco.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's plenty of opportunity. They've got access to the data. They've got access to the client base. But it's how you, as a bank or a fintech or anyone in the space, an entrepreneur, can actually approach them and utilize that data to move forward with your idea.
You've clearly seen different parts of the continent that have, like you said, they have peculiar challenges, and they're at different stages of their own evolution as far as payments and integration is concerned. Paint for me this picture of the best case situation and what you found as an opportunity that needs to be bettered in terms of a value chain of I want to buy something and I'm nowhere near the town. How are people innovating across the continent to ensure that they're leveraging the full reach of mobile technology and the payment platforms that are available?
I've had the pleasure of actually experiencing, I think it's about 10 African nations, predominantly in the south, the east, and the west. So my view is more specifically to those regions. I know North is further ahead because they've got access to the Middle East quicker and also the Europe as a whole. So if you take the looks of Kenya, for example, and actually, or not Kenya, the East and the West, one of the biggest challenges is infrastructure. I don't mean the technology infrastructure, unfortunately, also the addressing format. Whereas if you go to sub-Saharan Africa, it's not even a concern for us. So the challenges that the main ones that I've identified are specifically niche to a specific e-commerce or bank's drive. So take one of your common guys here, for example, or not, let's use an international one, the likes of eBay and Amazon. Their warehousing scenario will be completely different to that of a local e-commerce player. I know the biggest one here, or one of the biggest tier 1 players, is Zubershop. And so if you look at their warehousing and the warehousing of Amazon, I can guarantee you're playing in 2 different markets. From there, you've got the supply chain and how you can actually fill that last mile innovation, how you can reach your customer base, how can you do this efficiently on same-day delivery, how can you ensure that the payment process and the transaction there will actually be as seamless for the user and the e-commerce entrepreneur. And it's all about ensuring that process, from everything as simple to someone saying click on purchase online, to actually your guy all the way down at the end, making sure the warehousing is stocked, then moving on to delivery, making sure it's in stock. Because there's a couple of steps we always forget, like do we actually check that what we have in the warehouse matches up to what we've got on the website. I've often seen and had cases whereby I've heard of people who've tried to purchase something as simple as a phone cover, just to be told 2 days later it's out of stock.
Right, so the kind of inventory management that you find elsewhere might be different. So this calls for a keen ability to adapt to the environment that you find yourself in.
Most definitely. Adaptation is the only way you will be able to penetrate those unreachable people and actually gain their trust. As much as we say people don't trust the banks, it's a similar case to your online shops. I mean, I've seen, specifically if you look at Nigeria, there's so many e-tailers or e-commerce players that have the option to pay cash on site or on delivery. And that process as a whole could be taken out. But how do you get your customer to trust you? How do you put that infrastructure into place beforehand and actually build a reputable name, where it's a case of, oh yes, eBay, we've got no problem purchasing online because we know it'll get delivered. But that also comes into the standardization of an e-commerce platform. There's no standardization yet, and we need to create that. And we need to have a platform where everyone can come together as thought leaders, essentially, and design one and uphold it in the nations.
Wonderful. It's 29 minutes past 1. This is the Executive Lounge. We're live on all the social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube. And you can join the conversation with your questions or comments via WhatsApp number, which is 0244 340 437. My guest is Molly Newman, and she's the content director at Terrapin. And they are a global events company, and but she's focused on the financial services sector, and we're learning about her experiences and insights from across the continent about how different stages of the evolution in financial services inclusion and digital is being done across the continent. And I like that in some places addressing is a big deal, and some people also, especially where you're not having a population that's highly banked, that there are options for people to even make payments. So you could still order through the technological portals, but when you're done, the delivery is made and you can still pay cash on site, which is another expression of adapting the technology to the prevailing circumstances or environment that you find yourself in. Now, I'd like for you to help us appreciate. You mentioned the word seamless, and I know it speaks to what you run, this event, where will Africa ever be seamless? In your opinion, how long will it take for us to actually get to the point where we're completely seamless in the way we use financial services across technology?
Ideally, from my point of perspective, by creating a platform that actually brings together people and connects like-minded individuals, it won't take that long. As long as we work together and we unite, not only as a community or a region, but as a continent as a whole, we can learn off of others' successes and other challenges that others have faced. So to use your word leapfrogging again, it's definitely a key word, and it is, in my opinion, the key to the future successes. So it's difficult to put a number to it, but the market opportunities for innovation, for driving adaptation, for change are endless. And it's incredible what people have done or have thought of and developed with just a simple problem, which other countries find they forget it was even a problem to begin with. And they've managed to solve it. Whereas if we work together, who knows, maybe an idea that we find in one of the remote African nations can actually help the biggest economies. And the only way that this is possible is by us uniting as a continent and joining together to propel forward future thinking ideas and innovations in the financial services, the e-commerce, and the fintech space.
Now, according to, I'm going to just share some information with you via, this is a report from the Bank of Ghana in 2017. It was looking at the payment systems. And it seems that right across the continent, for us to be able to do cross-national trade, we all have to use either a Visa, a MasterCard, a China Pay, all of these payment platforms that are not African. The profits that would accrue to a business like Visa doesn't stay on the continent. Okay. Do you think that the growth potential is going to be hugely impacted if we find a way to break down the barriers of integration, or the barriers to integration, so that I could be here and be on one mobile phone network and still use my wallet, my mobile wallet, to do a transaction in South Africa?
Most definitely. As it is now, there actually are quite a few fintechs playing in that space, whereby you can send money from anywhere in Africa, across the globe, to South Africa. I'm using technology like remittances, for example. It might take a couple of minutes or a couple of hours to actually hit your account. But the nice thing about using this kind of innovation is, say, for example, you're trying to send money to your grandma who's based in the DRC, in the rural regions of DRC. The chances of her having a bank account or even or a bank card, whether it be MasterCard or Visa or Diners or China Pay or however many cards there are, she'll still be able to receive and send money. And I feel that technology has allowed us to breach quite a lot of gaps and to promote financial inclusion. It's one of the key structures that are coming into play. I mean, there's a fintech called World Remit that actually specializes in this, and they've got quite a far reach. I mean, we've partnered with them for several of our events whereby they've come on board and they've actually explained in great detail what they do to cover the diaspora and how they've actually managed to try and financially include as many people as they can, and they're actually being very successful.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. According to the Bank of Ghana report of 2017, the value of retail payments, and this is excluding cash, is purely across point of sale or mobile money, grew by more than 40% in terms of nominal. It's from 266 billion cedis to 381 billion. And this was largely because of retail payment instruments, mobile money accounting for, then we have eSwitch, which is also an electronic payment system. And then you also have then your Visa, debit, and all the others. But it seems that majority of the payments have sat in the mobile money space, and that's what's driving this growth. Now, if you are integrating a mobile or an e-commerce platform and you're selling either services or products or whatever it is, what kind of innovation have you seen across your travels that makes it possible for people who maybe not be very IT savvy and technophobes but have a feature phone but are still able to play in that space and still utilize e-commerce platforms to get by in life?
I've seen a few. Speaking from, obviously I'm based in South Africa, there it's predominantly EFT.
Okay.
So it is that card transaction. Otherwise, as I was saying, I know some other countries like Nigeria, they do cash on delivery. Some others do a credit whereby you order online, you have what we call a tab, and then you pay a final sum at the end of every month. Again, this could be cash on delivery, this could be EFT, it could be mobile money. There's so many different innovations out there. Your most common one, as you said, was mobile money, and that's because it allows you to include everyone in it. Right now, I think, especially in the Western region and to a lesser extent the East, you need that platform to enable payments. It's secure payments, because cash on delivery is fantastic. It's great. What happens if something happens to the delivery guy and unfortunately money's stolen, money's lost? You can't account for that. Whereas by using technology as an advantage, you can allow secure, safe engagements. But as I said, with the financial inclusion, we need to push to unite as many as we can.
Fantastic stuff, Molly. And so tell me a bit about Seamless. So it's been running for about 3 years now. And you've had lots of great thinkers in the financial services sector. What are some of the most striking ideas that you've seen during the time that you've been running Seamless?
So I've had the absolute pleasure of this year, I produced Seamless Africa, which before we regionalized the event, it looked at Africa as a whole. It was an event that took place in South Africa, and it brought together over 150 speakers from different backgrounds. I think if I recall correctly, we had 27 African nations represented.
Wow.
And so that's 50% of the continent. And unfortunately, as much as I'm happy that it's 50% of the country, the other 50% that weren't there needed to be there because they don't have the infrastructure in place. And Seamless is about bringing together everyone to make sure that we answer the calls and the need for tech innovation.
What was the last theme for Seamless? How do you pick the themes?
So I engage personally with all the banks in the regions. So specifically here in Ghana, I've engaged with every single bank. I've actually successfully had over 20 meetings with the key players. And through engagements with them, I've been able to identify the top trends, challenges, opportunities, and I've been able to create what we call our big headings, which address the theme. So our theme for Seamless as a whole is uniting Africa and creating that infrastructure for everyone to utilize moving forward, to be that platform that everyone needs to go to have their ideas heard. Some of our themes or our big headings under our theme include the biggest challenges, so your security aspect, your mobile aspect, your cross-border and remittances. How do I get money from Ghana to DRC? Also, I know it's not regulated here, but what blockchain can actually do, and how it as an innovation can actually help and progress forward. And so all the content is designed in such a way where at least 3 concerns per heading or per big challenge are being addressed. And they are highlighted by key players who understand the industry like the back of their hand. Because it's no good having someone who's from, I don't know, Asia, speak about a payments problem and transaction problems here in Ghana when they don't have a first-hand experience.
So these are people, so for you, you're looking at bringing the people who best understand the territory and the realities of the challenges they face and match that with the expertise.
Yes, that's a key play. That's a key role to have because, I mean, imagine if you had Standard Chartered from China. Well, they probably do understand the challenges that we are facing here. They've never experienced it. It's not a big focus for them because of the environment we live in, whereby it's difficult to send money across. It takes time. You have to have an account here, you have to do this, you have to do that. It helps. Well, it actually engages more to have someone from a like-minded background with the same passion that you do to innovate and drive Africa and specifically West Africa forward.
How much of the future of Africa, and I'm talking about it in its positive light, so Africa's rising, how much of that rise is going to be hinged on technology, fintech for that matter?
And that's quite a challenging one. If I was to put a percentage to it, I would say 70-80%. The best thing we as Africa, as a continent, have going for us is we've seen everyone else's challenges. There's no way we can default. We just need to put our minds to work in order to actually leapfrog. As I mentioned M-Pesa earlier, no one globally, not even just in Africa, has been able to replicate this. So if we can produce the likes of M-Pesa, what can't we do? And I think it's that change of mindset and the inclusion. It's that change of mindset, adaptability, collaboration methods and strategies that will propel us forward. We need to work together. Well, I do understand that challenge or competition is very healthy, and yes, we do need it, because if there's no competitor, what's going to make you be different? What's going to make you want to improve and change and incorporate technology? But I think we need to drive each other forward.
Where's the place of the state in all of this? I mean, technology is pretty disruptive and tends to go ahead of the curve when it comes to policy space. Do you think that this time policy and tech should be walking side by side, or the policy should still be catching up with tech?
I think we're in the space where policy is catching up to tech, but I think we have the potential to actually work side by side There are a few challenges whereby we can't incorporate, like I mentioned earlier, you can't include blockchain technology if it's not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
But blockchain is so innovative that there are so many countries and industries that are actually using it and applying it to assist their nations.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a case of blockchain being integrated into agriculture and farming. So it's very difficult to actually say if they will line up, but they should. But definitely technology will be leading the way forward, at least for the next 20 to 15 years, 20 to 25 years, unfortunately, because of where we are. Also, the unfortunate thing is policy takes a while to adjust and to change and to incorporate, to analyze the risks and how we can utilize it to move forward, not hold us back.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas technology is not going to wait for no one.
It's not going to take prisoners. It's not going to wait. So there has to be a certain fair amount of policy agility that they have to be able to be very quick in terms of understanding and embracing them. That said, would you say that in spite of the fact that policy may lag behind technology, generally technological development and advancement on the continent, where would you put it in terms of its growth and evolution? Has it been good? Has it been too slow?
The tech growth on the continent has been phenomenal. It's assisted in issues that we've had, which we didn't even know we had, and it brings a certain comfort that because of what it's doing, people are actually adjusting policies and they're trying to collaborate and utilize the tech, because at the end of the day, the tech is there to help us. As much as every now and again our phones don't work, so we hate technology that day, at the end of the day, when you need to speak to your grandma in the DRC or someone in the UK, tech is going to enable us. And it's that enablement that will actually unite us, push us forward.
Mm-hmm. Recently, I came across an interesting statistic that Africa's spending consumption value by 2050 is projected to be about $4.3 trillion. And of course, we're going to be topping 1.5 billion by then. So there's quite a substantive amount of money to be made and spent on the continent alone. If I'm an entrepreneur today, I'm looking for somewhere to pitch my tent and grow my business, where would you say I should be focusing on with eye on the $4.3 trillion prize?
Those numbers always terrify me. Look, that's where I would say it would completely depend on what you are wanting to build. For example, if you're wanting to go into the financial services sector, you would probably have to look at a nation that is either struggling, but you've also got to look at their policies and their governance and compliance. If they have said, no, we're not going to deal with this kind of technology, unfortunately, no matter how good your product is or your services are, your challenges are going to constantly be met because it's not regulated or there's no governance. There's no standardized code. You need to find a place whereby you can grow and develop and nothing will change or nothing will hinder you. Whereby if you move into, like if you were looking to become an e-commerce entrepreneur and sell a specific product or a specific service for the e-commerce space, you'd have to also keep in mind where your big players sit. So, for example, Nigeria, you've got More4Africa, which is the biggest e-commerce player in Africa as a whole. And they've recently, 24 months, partnered with eBay. And that is what will probably drive local acceptability and will assist with the transit, the payments. So it'll cut it down by saying, cool, cash on delivery, no thanks, we don't mind EFTing you. So you've also got to look at creating international and local partnerships with the right people. It's fantastic if you create 20 million partnerships, But what you get for those 20 million versus what one will give you, you've got to weigh up the cons and the pros.
So in essence, you're advocating that we've got to have to start looking at ways at leveraging cross-border partnerships, because it might be the quickest way to get our own eBays in terms of the size, the sheer size to be able to deliver across various geographies.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, some of the e-commerce players that I've seen on this continent are phenomenal. And personally, I always shop local because I'm enabling my own community. As much as everyone loves, I bought from this place, I bought from that place, we do need to empower our local entrepreneurs. But the cross-border needs to stay specifically with Africa in order to unite it.
Yeah. So one of the biggest, I don't know whether it's a myth, is that the growth and expansion of fintech would mean that imagine a graph. Okay, so the fintech keeps going up, brick and mortar goes low. So people in the fashion industry might move away from building high street shops and stores, and that things are now going to be set in warehouses, and we'll be ordering products off our handsets. Do you feel that the typical African nature of connection, how will fintech sit in the scheme of things when it comes to the fact that we like to be able to see people, we like to be able to interact with people, and fintech kind of at some point looks like it would take away some of that?
It's a very interesting question because in certain elements it will work, in certain elements it won't. So for your retail and your e-commerce side, yes, I understand completely. People will want that intimate, I know you, you know me, plus also the tangibility. There's nothing better than going to your biggest store or to MTN and buying an iPhone and actually being able to hold it versus that wait of 3 or 4 days because it's got to come from their warehouse. But on the other side of the scale, if you look at it from a bank perspective, I don't know many people, including some bankers, who like to go stand in a branch to withdraw cash. So fintech has a lot of, or tech innovation and fintech, they have a lot of possibilities, but in other sectors they have a lot of challenges. Because, as I said, you want to have that face-to-face approach with customers. You want to be able to hear their feedback and what they're saying. But no one wants to talk, or no one wants to walk into a bank or a branch or pay your utility bills. No one wants to go stand in Home Affairs or your passport control. If it can be done electronically, I could quite comfortably say 9 out of 10 people will try and do it electronically.
So it's an enabler, and it's not necessarily just a disruptor. So you said you're back in November with Seamless. What should I expect to see when I come to Seamless?
Firstly, I love Ghana so much I might be back a little bit before then.
Okay, cool.
But most certainly, my team and I will be back here for Seamless, which, as I mentioned earlier, it's bringing together like-minded innovators across the borders, across the region. I mean, we have 14 countries represented from West. That's excluding the likes of Egypt, Kenya, and South Africa, to also just highlight the challenges there a little bit, obviously just to give a bit more of a holistic view of it. And this platform is to empower people and to inspire creativity and innovation in the space, to address challenges across the region and eventually, hopefully, across Africa.
I'm looking forward to this, to be at Seamless, because, I mean, the conversation is I want to understand where fintech is going and how it could possibly be used to give me a nice slice of that $4.3 trillion someday in the future.
Oh, no, the fintech innovation space, the 4.2 billion, I could quite comfortably say is probably the bottom of what you could expect going forward.
Wow.
There's so much going on. It's hard to actually put into writing.
Well, thank you very much. We are almost out of time, and see how time flies.
Exactly, but I look forward to seeing you on the 6th and the 7th.
I will be there 6th and 7th of November right here in Accra, Seamless, Terrapin and bringing Seamless to West Africa. And if you're happy with what you've heard, I certainly would want to be there to hear more, because it's just mind-blowing, some of the stuff that you talked about, that, you know, people are doing cool stuff.
They really are.
Thank you, Molly. Molly Newman from Terrapin. You're the content director, and thank you for joining me on the Executive Lounge.
Thank you for having me on here. It was an absolute pleasure.
Good. So my 5 takeouts from this conversation. Number 1 is that you must adapt. Adaptation or adaptability helps you try and make sure that you take best practices, technology, bring it into your space so it answers the problems and challenges facing you in that space. Number 2 is collaboration. That if we're going to really grow this business or fintech across the continent, then we must learn to collaborate with the best people across the space. And number 3 is to know the space. Talk to people who are on the ground. Talk to people who are facing it day in, day out, and let them tell you, what they're feeling, and then you can make some informed choices from that. And number 4, for me, is what I would like to call guided ambition. That by all means, have a big goal, big, hairy, audacious goals, but you have to make the right choices. So it has to be calculated risk-taking based on that knowledge that you have acquired. And then that agility is the final thing. That technology is going to eat us alive. We have to keep up. It's not going to take any prisoners. And if you choose to stay, you will be left behind, because it's not waiting for anyone. And all it provides are possibilities for a better life for all. So, once again, thank you, Molly Newman, for stopping by.
Absolute pleasure.
And up next is the midday. Sorry, did I say midday? Up next is the Joy News headline at 2. And I'm out of here, and I leave you with a song, one of my very own favorites. It's Instruma, Aquabwa, and Becca. And more of those coming up on the drive time with my man Lexus and